So now we're going to talk about the details of the hyperbola. And I'm going to work on a side-to-side hyperbola. And then when we do the equations, we'll talk a little bit more about both of them. So we have what's called a transverse axis, okay? Transverse axis. And then we have what's called the conjugate axis. So this would be the conjugate axis. And you can think of them being similar to the major axis and minor axis for an ellipse, okay? Where those two intersect, that is going to be the center. Okay, and we saw similar things when we were doing an ellipse. Okay, we have vertices. So we're going to have a vertex maybe here and a vertex maybe here, okay? So we're going to call this the vertex and this a vertex. So you'll have two vertices. And then we have co-vertices here and here. So you might be saying, hey, this is kind of like what we were doing with the ellipse. Yeah, and so far it is kind of like what we were doing with that. Okay, now, instead of drawing an ellipse, though, what we draw is called the central rectangle. So far, we haven't, like in graphing terms, we haven't really done anything different with a hyperbola than we have for the ellipse. We've got a center, we've got the vertices, we've got the co-vertices. But this central rectangle, that's important to the graphing. And what you do is you're just drawing a rectangle that includes the co-vertices and the vertices, okay? Now, it's pretty easy to draw like on graph paper. That's like not a big deal. It's like you're making an ellipse, but it's not an ellipse. It's a rectangle, okay? Those points are not points of the hyperbola. They're just used to help us graph it, okay? Now, the vertices, those are points on the hyperbola, but okay. Then what we draw are asymptotes. And the asymptotes are the diagonals on that rectangle. And they have to go through the center. Now they're straight, you could get a ruler and that would help. But your asymptotes, I'll try to draw it. It's going to go through this corner, the center, and then out the other corner. And then you're going to have another one in this direction. Okay, those are the asymptotes. Asymptotes. And this is also an asymptote. Okay. So far we have a bunch of like dotted lines, right? Okay. The dotted lines aren't part of the graph actually. But what happens is the vertex, okay, that is a point. I don't know what color to do it in, but I'm going to do it in black. The vertex is a point on the hyperbola. We didn't talk about the foci, so I need to talk about the foci. Okay. The foci are out of the central box, okay? And they could be, you know, close to the vertex or the vertices, or they could be further apart. But to draw the actual hyperbola, which we're going to want to do, we're going to want to graph, what's happening is you're going from the vertex toward the asymptotes. So there's one. It's going to be in two pieces, or they call them branches. And then the other one's going to go like this. You could find more ordered pairs to get a better shape, but we don't usually. This is usually how we graph it. We just make the branches approach the asymptote. Now the branch that I drew on the left, that one's not too bad. My one on the right looks a little bit goofier, but that we'll draw several of these and you'll see how those work, okay? So those are the details. You have a transverse axis, a conjugate axis. If you don't remember those names, that's okay, but you have to have the axes. Where they cross, that's the center. That's important because you have to know where the center is. Then you draw that, well, you have to graph the vertices and the co-vertices. Then you you dot in the central rectangle. That's what's going to allow you to get the asymptotes, and then you're going to be able to graph the hyperbola. Okay, so that's kind of a recap. In the next video, we'll show you the equations.